To get started, what first motivated you to get into martial arts like judo and BJJ and later teach them as well?
Well, I grew up in the 80s, and my father was my black belt instructor, so there was no choice. I was never motivated to do it. Besides the fact that my dad was on the mat every day, and so was my brother. You could definitely say that's motivation, but I don't think there was ever a discussion, hey, I think you should do this. And it was never like that. It was just, this is what we do. You're a Camarillo. My dad's job in his eyes was to try to make an Olympic champion. And so we've heard those stories before, and then if you take that story and then you say, hey, you're going to grow up in the 80s, which is a totally different time in the US. I don't know how things were in Germany in the 80s, but we didn't have safe spaces. It was just hardcore training, and there was no shelter. There was no way to avoid it. And it took me about 10 years to get to the point where I was addicted to it, whereas those 10 years were rough. I didn't like it. I wanted to quit multiple times. I hid my uniform, my gi, my judo gi from my father. But I didn't do a very good job of it because he had an extra one in the car. And so there was some stress in those first 10 years, and I would want to be a normal kid. I saw what the normal kids were doing. The normal kids would socialize better. They would go to the football games, for example, in high school, and there were a lot more activities that they did that I didn't have energy for or didn't have time for because I was doing judo. But like I said, I think you do something over and over again and you have that much support. And I say that on purpose. I wasn't given a choice, but it's still support. Because then you fast forward and you become a parent and you become, that catapulted me forward to have the skills to be in the space I'm in. So many different avenues that my career has, the directions that my career has gone, would not exist without, I think, being a bit forced.
Mm-hmm. And what principles do you think should everyone incorporate into their lives from BJJ or judo, and why should people consider starting with these martial arts?
I think principles, parallels to life. I think jiu-jitsu is a game. I think everyone likes to play games. Some people say when you say game, you think of kids. I played games with adults, and they giggle and laugh just like kids do. And I think that goes into learning. What is the best way to learn? I think is when you're not just relaxed, but like you're focused and you're happy and you're feeling that your natural barriers are kind of like lowered, whether it's social anxieties or a lack of confidence in a certain area. When we play basketball, we forget all of those things and we have a goal. And the goal is to put a ball in a larger circle. And then we get our team together and we all are busy and our heart rate goes up and we start sweating. And we forget we're working out. We forget that we're getting better at footwork. We forget all these skills that we're learning. And so the principles of jiu-jitsu, I think it starts with it's a game and it's a specific goal that we're trying to, there's a certain task that we're trying, or certain problems that we're trying to find solutions for. And that's why for me, jiu-jitsu is forever, because those goals are constantly evolving. And so the enemy is evolving constantly, and I have to know my enemy, but they're evolving, and I have to evolve my game, and I have to adjust my game. And I think the main, going back to principle of jiu-jitsu, is that it never ends. And at times I forget of all the skills that I'm accruing because my brain is so involved in that problem-shooting space, that problem-solving space.
And what advice would you give to a beginner in BJJ or judo?
I know the advice that a lot of instructors would give. Traditionally, it's survive, which is kind of funny because, and they say you should work your defense. And I do things traditionally the opposite. I think you should go into it with an instructor who articulates to you that you're going to be tapped and submitted and say uncle over and over and over again. And the more you do it, the more because your brain is constantly recording the experience, the more you're anticipating it. The more you anticipate it, the more you can look out for it. The more you can look out for it, the more you can cultivate natural defenses to it, which then in the end Like if I work with my hands a lot, I naturally develop calluses. The way people teach jiu-jitsu, I think traditionally is you want to avoid calluses. No. I articulate the opposite. I think you should understand that you're gonna have calluses, prepare for it, get your mind already set for it, and then figure it out from there. Jiu-jitsu is the greatest art. That could be a really good question. Why is it the greatest art? Because it teaches you dynamic and deliberate problem solving. It desensitizes you to being choked, having your limbs bent backwards, being pinned. And so your threshold for claustrophobia goes up. It doesn't go away, but it goes up. It teaches you or desensitizes you to being grabbed. And all these things in the physical realm can happen with bullies, because bullies never go away. There's always going to be a bully that you have to deal with. Or at least the confidence to preemptively shut down a bully before they get physical with you. And so I think that's why jiu-jitsu, so many people like it and they do it forever. Also, it's the most user-friendly art of the sparring arts. Like if we say judo, why would I want to get thrown on my back over and over again? It makes no sense. Traditionally, the wind blows the sail in one direction, meaning if you start judo later in life, you're going to struggle. If you start it when you're young, it makes sense, like I did, if that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm. And what are the advantages of combining both BJJ and judo?
I would say judo is like speed chess, whereas jiu-jitsu is like no timer chess, which I can't play. My brain is like ADD, and it's hard for me to. I literally can't get through a regular game of chess. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. But I can play speed chess because it's at a speed that I'm used to, and that's judo. It's so dynamic, it's so fast. You're grip fighting, up, down, left, right kind of thing. Whereas jiu-jitsu, many times, once you pin, the game slows down because it gets into a more deliberate realm, if that makes sense.
And as a world-renowned coach yourself, what do you consider important when teaching martial arts like BJJ or judo, and how do you prepare your athletes for competitions?
Games. I just go back to games. I think the greatest way to learn is games. There's certain moves. I'll give you an example. There's like hip escape. Do you know what a hip escape is?
No.
You just started?
I mean, I would offer myself if you want to demonstrate.
No worries. So this is a hip escape.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So why do we hip escape? It creates space so that I can bring my frames, my upper and lower body frames, to defend against or shield myself from side control. That's basically what I'm. So we use it both to put back in guard or avoid getting our legs passed into side control, which is a pin. Okay. I think it's the most difficult move in jiu-jitsu. And people say it's day one jiu-jitsu. I've tried to teach kids hip escape for many years, and it's never been easy. And the problem with that is if you have a new student, even an adult, they're already going through so many barriers to being successful at jiu-jitsu by just walking through the door. The next one is getting on the mat. Why, if they've gone through that, do I want to make jiu-jitsu less user-friendly by showing them a difficult move? Because nobody wants to feel, or nobody feels happy being clumsy. If there's not a smooth experience of jiu-jitsu, it's very difficult to hold on to anybody. But the second I put someone in side control on them, and I say put them back in guard, I show them what guard is, they naturally do it anyway. That's game. So the game is on bottom is to put them back in guard. The game on top is to keep them in side control. I think that's the easiest way for people to learn. We'll teach them technique, we'll teach them why certain things work, but sometimes I think there's too much emphasis on slowing the game down and being a philosopher of jiu-jitsu. Versus, because jiu-jitsu instructors are very smart and they're very egotistical, like anybody. People think because I do martial arts that I don't have an ego. I do martial arts because I have an ego. My ego is to better myself. That's not a bad thing. When we say ego, people think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It can be bad if I'm an egoist or egotistical, but if I temper it with empathy and channel it to make myself better so that I can protect my family, or make myself better so that I have better mental health, then it's an asset. But jiu-jitsu instructors, I think there's a tendency for them to think that learning is based more on how smart, and this is important to get your point across, but slowing the learning process down to dig deep on why something works has its place. But when we talk about catapulting yourself forward in terms of learning and maximizing your time on the mat when people don't have a lot of time in their lives, games.
What would you say, what benefits are there for children to start early with training judo or BJJ?
Like my son trains, it becomes normalized. And so what are we trying to normalize for our children? Adjusting to struggle, dealing with struggle, overcoming struggle. Without that, I think a child's in trouble when they reach adulthood. And they're not equipped with dealing with stress of a job, personality types, long hours, and as a society, then the society starts moving in a certain direction. Okay, so we're normalizing a structure of physical activity based on self-preservation when we do jiu-jitsu. And that's crucial for adulthood. With a bit of aggression, in an environment where they're developing their skill sets being a part of a team. And so notice aggression and being a part of a team. So those combined, so aggression without being a part of a team, I have an issue with. Being a part of a team without some kind of like, I want to better myself, which is ego, because ego is self, me and my thoughts about myself and where I am in the world, by itself I don't think is adequate. I think if you combine those two, you're creating a very good adult. Self-reliance.
Yeah. And finally, why did you found Guerrilla Jiu-Jitsu, and in your opinion, what makes a good martial arts gym?
Why was I a founder? It just made sense to me. I think back when I was learning jiu-jitsu, and I was 19 when I started. I was the first judo jiu-jitsu black belt that I knew of, and I was combining the two arts. So guerrilla jiu-jitsu became like, hey, I'm combining these two arts. I'm doing something that nobody's doing at that time. Today, a lot of people are doing it. A lot of people are doing so many amazing things. But that just became the team brand, and an unorthodox method of doing something, guerrilla jiu-jitsu. What I thought made a good martial arts gym when I was in my 20s is not the same as now. I don't think these are bad gyms, but in my 20s, I could walk into a gym and it could smell. I could see people without their shirts on, tattoos, cursing, talking about their weekend. I could see fights break out in the corner and think it's cool. The mats were like a slip and slide because people are training hard, which I think is good for all gyms. It means people are working hard. Today, if I walk into a gym and it stinks, I walk right back out of it. If somebody doesn't say, hey, how you doing? When I walk into a gym, just like anywhere else, I walk out. So I think a good gym is run professionally. For us, it's a family environment, so we're all inclusive. The second you start cursing in the corner, shirts off, and I'm excluding families because, I wouldn't want my son to be subjected to that. And so I think everything you see at Guerrilla Jiu-Jitsu academies is what I think a good academy should be for me. Obviously, I'm very opinionated. And we do instructor training, and I bring all our guys together. I'm at the top. And I lay down some, which we've been doing for years, things to consider, how we develop a better youth program? How do we relate to clients? How we talk to people? How we remind ourselves, especially during the grind of teaching, that inspiration is crucial, and many people who come here and train remind us that this is the greatest part of my day. If that continues, I think we're doing a good job.